Sono, thanks for the invite. I'm really happy that we're in this room because we're close to the ice cream, and some of us decided last night to get locked into that place because it's so good, including the chocolate. So we're very happy to be here, and I'll sneak off in a few minutes. I thought I'm going to just talk a little bit about my personal journey and what I'm up to now, and use practical examples of how I try to embed sustainability into what I'm doing. I became CEO of Puma at the tender age of 29, about 20 years ago, and at the time, Puma was a bankrupt company, and I couldn't really spend much time worrying about sustainability, and I would say that the word hasn't really crossed my desk in the early days. And my deputy at the time, who said, well, I think we need to start cleaning up our manufacturing facilities, I told him we don't have money for this. So that was my humble beginning as somebody who really loved nature, grew up in nature myself, but really didn't understand what it needed in order to make business sustainable, and that business actually had to become a driving force for sustainability, because it was responsible for most of the problems that we are facing today in our environment and partially in society. So over time, I came to realize that business was really part of the problem and needed to become part of the solution. Originally, I thought it was up to governments, but very soon I realized that governments were not capable because they were local, they were national, and business was global, and that we really needed to start taking that responsibility very seriously, not just as a responsibility, but looking at it as an opportunity at the same time. And that really changed it for me, and we started about 8 years ago at Puma to create what we call Puma Vision, the vision of a better world, which became the vision of the company and the brand, a world that is more creative, more peaceful, and safer. And based on that platform, we then established an ethical foundation, which we call the four keys of being fair, honest, positive, and creative. So everything we are doing within the business has to be fair, honest, positive, creative. If you do not have an ethical foundation that is sound, you will always deviate and you will make compromises. But if you can say yes to all of those four keys and questions, then you move forward. So it became kind of the foundation to what we were trying to do. We started with a lot of projects. We started the Puma BritDoc Impact Awards that Chris actually won the first one with the end of the line. We started to embed sustainability into the business by saying we want to be the most desirable and sustainable sport lifestyle company. And on that basis, we really defined our principles of what sustainability meant for Puma. And we talked about CFOs this morning. I was actually CFO and CEO for 10 years until I realized that was a dangerous thing to do, and you could end up in prison by making a mistake, talking to yourself all the time. So I passed on my CFO responsibility and dedicated my time to sustainability, which was really taking up, I would say, 30–40% of my time in my last years until I left. So in wearing my CFO hat, I was thinking, well, how can we make sustainability also tangible from a numbers point of view? Because it's such a subjective discussion. What is sustainability? And while I was writing my first book together with a Benedictine monk, I read a lot about valuing natural capital, and that's when Pavan crossed my desk as well, because he was just about to finalize his TEEP study. And I said, well, that's great. That's exactly the answer. We will need to monetize the value of nature in business in order to make sustainability transparent and measurable. And to my surprise, after we did research, we realized there was nobody that has ever done it. And to me, it was just such a logical thing to do. How do you just monetize your environmental footprints? Because I don't have time as a CEO to read a sustainability report that is 200 pages long and too complicated. I need to see in 2 minutes, where's my impact? So we developed the so-called EP&L, the environmental profit and loss account, which was a first for any business to then also publish. And what the environmental P&L does is in fact, it puts a monetary value in euros or cents, and no matter what currency you use, to the environmental impacts that business has along the entire supply chain. So it's not just looking at your own operations, it's looking from the very beginning where you source your raw materials to the end consumer. So it takes carbon, it takes water, it takes land use, waste, air pollution into consideration, and it now monetizes each, that you can now compare it. And the interesting outcome, and we actually published the results, the annual footprint of Puma, annual environmental impact footprint is 145 million euros per year. So if nature was a business, that's what nature would charge us if we value the impacts, the negative impacts that Puma as a business has throughout the entire supply chain, not just through its own operations. The interesting bit was that our own operations only accounted for 8 million or 6% of the entire footprint. And I think that's where part of the problem is. When business talks about sustainability, it usually just focuses on its own operation. But in reality, the footprint is elsewhere. So you can drive the cleanest cars, you can put solar panels in your stores on top of your offices and become the most sustainable company. But the reality is you only impact a very small percentage of your overall footprint. In fact, the biggest footprint you create when you make the decision what raw material to use. 57% of the entire footprint of the 145 million annual impact is actually generated by using 3 materials: cotton, rubber, and leather. Leather being the worst, that's why we should all go vegetarian. So those 3 actually account for 57% of the impact, which means the moment I tell my designers, these are the 3 raw materials you use, you've already accounted for 57% of the impact. If you then add the processing of those materials, you're well over 80%. So that's where the problem actually is. So where you need to focus is with your raw materials. So if you really want to improve on your true impact, operations is good, manufacturing is fine. Manufacturing is only 13 million or 8%, but the rest is far down the supply chain. And while 20 years ago when I started as a CEO, I had no idea where my raw materials were coming from, today I need to know. I need to be sure that it's not coming from Brazil out of a rainforest that was cut down. I have to make sure it's not coming from Uzbekistan where child labor is involved. I have to make sure that we're actually sourcing those raw materials today because we do not yet have replacements in areas that have the least environmental impact. By having the environmental P&L, I can actually steer my decision by going to areas that have a lesser water impact, that have a lesser impact on land use. And I can look at all of my impacts and actually define where it's best to source, where it's least impacting the environment. So that's what the ePNL does. It measures the environmental footprint, and it does it in a very simple way. And that's something that I'm trying to scale up internationally, because I believe if every business was really doing it, we would walk the talk, or we would be ideally understand first what we're actually doing, because sustainability needs to become more tangible, it needs to become transparent, it needs to become objective. So that was really, to me, a breakthrough for me personally, wearing my CFO hat. And it is great for anybody in the business, because if you really want to institutionalize sustainability in your business, you have your numbers, and now you can brief everyone, every function, every division, every designer, and set environmental targets. And that's when you start managing what you measure. If you don't measure, you can't manage. And that's the key of the ePNL. So after 20 years, I decided that I could only do so much with Puma. We became the most desirable and sustainable sport lifestyle company. I'm not going to talk about more practical examples. Maybe in the Q&A we can talk about it. But we were on a really good track, doing a biodegradable product, getting rid of our shoe boxes and replacing it with much more sustainable materials or less environmentally damaging materials, and. But I realized that I could only do so much. And with one brand you can change a little bit, but if you really dedicate 100% of your time to this cause, then you can make a major contribution by partnering, collaborating with others. So I decided that after 20 years, it was time to move on, still being somebody who is entrenched in business, but without the operational experience on a day-to-day. So I decided, besides setting up my own foundation, that I'm going to talk about in a second, to actually really get entrenched in several boards to implement sustainability throughout as a board member. So I joined Kering, which is the holding company which owns Puma, and among other brands, luxury brands like Gucci, Stella McCartney, Alexander McQueen, Bottega Veneta, many luxury brands. And while they called me the sustainable Taliban initially, when I talked to my colleagues, especially from the luxury brands, I managed to convert them into true experts and having a passion. Because, you know, now you're dealing with sustainability in the luxury world, and they sort of think, you know, what is that? The tree hugger who comes along who's telling us we need to be green? No, because I believe that you have to really embed sustainability into the DNA of every brand. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do, so that one day the way we do business will be sustainable without us ever having to talk about sustainability. How do you do that? If you take a luxury brand, luxury is about heritage, it's about tradition, it's about quality. What's not sustainable in the long run is not great quality, is it? So we defined sustainability as being of great quality, and what better than use a luxury brand that has longevity, that uses craftsmanship, that manufactures its products in Europe, and that has, in fact, and we are now doing an EP&L for all 21 brands within the Kering Group, has a much lesser environmental impact the way it is set up, and hence has a competitive edge over the fast-moving, quick-turning brands. What better to define sustainability as quality? And that's exactly what we're doing. So we're doing an EP&L for all 21 brands. We are having all our key managers remunerated according to clear achievement of objectives. 15% of the bonus actually come through the achievement of sustainability targets, and we're establishing it in each and every brand. And a perfect example within our portfolio is Stella McCartney, who does not use leather, which in effect has the biggest environmental footprint. You know, originally because of animal welfare, but also now because she understands that actually not using leather will have a lesser impact on the environment. Now, I became a little outspoken about using leather, and you know, the whole leather industry went crazy and started chasing me. But the reality is we need to start measuring those impacts, because then we can actually also change the incentive systems that are completely screwed up today to incentivize more sustainable or less unsustainable materials that we use. And I will talk about what that means in a second through the B team. So that's Kering. Now I'm on the board of Harley-Davidson as well. Now you may say, what are you doing on the board of Harley-Davidson? I love riding Harley-Davidsons, of course, but there came a point when I said, guys, I mean, sustainability, there's nothing, okay? And you have to switch the camera off and the journalists have to stop writing. But you know, after a while, and I said, well, you know, we got to do something. And what's incredible about this company is that it is so professional that once it embraces something, it gets really, really powerful, and there's nobody better than the Harley consumer to live your brand on a daily basis. So you have millions of consumers out there that live the hog life every day. So we did a long workshop and we said, okay, what does sustainability mean for a brand like Harley-Davidson? We came up with the following. We said, Harley is about preserving and renewing the ride of the Harley-Davidson. It's about preservation and renewal. And if you look at the 110-year history, this year was the 110th anniversary of the brand, it's all about preserving and renewing the Harley-Davidson brand. That's your hook into sustainability. So we launched an extensive program this summer by actually saying, okay, how do we get the hog consumer to now embrace not just social initiatives that Harley is famous for, but also environmental initiatives, and we are having a partnership with the Nature Conservancy, and in addition to, of course, also looking at how we can make the product more sustainable, less unsustainable. So rest assured, Harley has embedded sustainability and is working extremely hard to make sure that it's leading the way in the Harley way without compromising the brand integrity and identity, by actually embracing it the way we look at Harley today and want to see it positioned in the future. So I'm chairing the sustainability committee for Harley-Davidson as well, which is what's really nice, and everyone who's part of business should set up a sustainability committee in a board, because usually it is the most frequented committee that you can have. Nobody wants to be in the audit committee, nobody wants to be in the HR committee, everybody wants to be in the sustainability committee. So set one up and they will join you. Then I'm also, through my foundation, I started an initiative that's called The Long Run. So I felt it was important for me to also live sustainability myself. As somebody who's sort of traveling most of the time, I always get the question, okay, you came from LA, you're now in Thailand, you're going to Cape Town, and you go back to your, what are you? What are you doing about your footprint? I said, well, I'm actually, purely from a travel point of view, I should be considered an environmental pig. But I'm trying to leave this planet one day with the message, I will leave a net positive impact behind. So I'm actually measuring my environmental impact. And that's what led me to start my foundation. and to live sustainability also in my daily life. And that's why I actually bought a property in Kenya 7 years ago, which I just opened for tourism, sort of as the guinea pig of the philosophy that we came up with. The philosophy is about the 4 C's of holistically managing sustainability, because if you don't look at the 4 C's together, somebody's going to lose out. Society will, nature will, business will, or something else. So the 4 C's are about commerce, because that's what I know best, conservation, community, and culture. I believe culture is important. Most wars are fought over cultural differences or cultural misunderstandings. So culture is important, and hence we're talking about the quadruple rather than the triple bottom line. So community is about your employees. It's about everyone that depends on what you do, the communities around you. Commerce is the platform I know best, and that's why everything we do is commercially based. And we now have 36 retreats that are part of the Long Run Alliance, and I'm very happy that Sono with Soneva Fushi also is part of the Long Run Alliance and is going through a certification process that we developed to actually certify the destinations that are within the portfolio for having a net positive impact on nature and as a whole throughout the 4 C's. So again, it is putting sustainability to action. It is measuring what you do, and it is something that will have a net positive impact, because that's what we have to achieve. If we know, and we do know, that we are living outside of planetary boundaries, we have to start creating some positive impacts. And which industry is better suited than tourism? Which today, I believe, is in essence totally unsustainable in many ways. Maybe not in cultural sides, but certainly from an environmental point of view, because it's not really taking responsibility for the areas it manages. And I'm not talking about a 4, 5, or 10 acre retreat. I'm talking about the beauty of everything that's around it. And I believe just like business needs to take responsibility for the supply chain, for the entire supply chain, the tourism industry needs to take responsibility for the natural capital, the natural assets it utilizes beyond its own retreat. And that's why I believe, through the Long Run Initiative, we can also contribute to sustainability and turning one industry that can influence so many people and so many lives and convert so many people to sustainability to actually live it on the ground. And that's why I have my own retreat in Kenya, because I feel that when people come, just like we are all here, you leave with a sense of energy, you leave with excitement, and you learn something through practical examples. And I think that's what kind of changed me, really seeing what business does on the ground in negative ways, and how you can actually impact and turn it around in positive ways. And I believe that all of us, once we are touched by the virus, the positive virus of sustainability, that's when we can actually contribute. Now, I'm often being asked, am I an optimist or pessimist? And I think this debate is kind of, doesn't lead to anything. I just want to contribute, and I think if all of us contribute in our own ways, then we can make a major contribution through collaboration. And that leads me to the B team. Because one of the initiatives that Richard and I launched just this summer is based on the idea that business needs to start to collaborate. It's not something business is used to, and I've now learned in the last 2.5 years that business is completely not set up to cooperate. And I believe cooperation is absolutely essential if we want to really find solutions to the significant problems that we are having. So the B team is a collaborative effort of 16 business leaders that came together to have a positive agenda. Now, I came up with the name B team rather than A team because the A team is taken. We look a lot better than the A team anyway, so we became the B team. B actually stands for business, barrier busting, breakthrough, all the good Bs. And we believe that by collaborating and bringing together business leaders that have made a positive contribution as much as they could in their business lives, and they are not the philanthropists that retired and now want to do good, but they've actually tried to do something through their business, we can show other business leaders that it can be done, and by working together we can find solutions. So we have people like Mohamed Yunus, we have Ariane Huffington, Ratan Tata, Guillaume Leal from Brazil, Zhang Zhu from China, and 14 others together with 2 honorary leaders, Gro Brundtland and Mary Robinson, who came together to start this initiative, which we want to scale and actually make a movement, turn into a movement, appoint leaders, business leaders, while we are the core B team around the world, so that they can take on specific projects and collaborate with each other. So it's really a positive agenda that wants to catalyze change. We don't have all the answers. We may not even have few answers, but what we can do through our collective power as leaders, we can actually take great ideas that are already out there, bring people together and catalyze those approaches so that they get the spotlight that they deserve in order to hopefully, you know, see some positive results. So that's something which I'm very excited about. And we just had our meeting in South Africa a couple of weeks ago. And it's nice to see that, you know, leaders that have sort of had their own agenda and that are trying to contribute are now coming together really collaboratively to make change. And it's not easy until you've created that mojo that everyone is sort of working in harmony together. It takes time, and that really showed me that business is just not set up to collaborate. But I truly believe collaboration is absolutely key. Without collaboration, we're not going to find the solutions we need. So I think and hope that that gives you a bit of a summary. There's a lot more to talk about, but I only had 15 minutes. I don't want the gong to ring, and we have plenty of time for questions. Thanks.